Hey everybody, it's Ruben. Welcome back to the Placebo Effect. So I wanted to do a review about a show called The Good Place. And so The Good Place is a show that basically is a big narrative about what happens to us in the afterlife. And it's starring Kristen Bell as a character called Eleanor and Michael, not to be confused with the Archangel Michael, but the architect Michael, played by Ted Danson, are the main characters in the story. And there's a pretty good rounded out cast of characters as well. You've got uh, Jason, who's this likable idiot. You've got Chidi, who becomes Eleanor's love interest. You've got Tani, who's a narcissist, Michael Eleanor, and then this other gal called Janet, who is basically like the cosmic Siri. She's essentially a humanoid manifestation of the universal cosmic computer know-it-all. And so if you've never watched this show, then definitely want to say spoiler alerts right here. So let's keep going. So anyway, you've got this cast of characters, right? And so, Michael being the architect, he has assembled a plan where he wants to recruit his own personal Janet so that he can weave, as an architect, a whole new universe for the damned that he wants to call the good place. But it's not really the good place. And he has these 4 test subjects played by Eleanor, Jason, Chidi, and Tahani to demonstrate how he can essentially torture these people in a new perverted way by making them think they're in the good place. Anyway, he's able to sell this plan, and so off we go. And so right off the gate, we see Eleanor, who is in the new lobby because she's just recently died, and she enters into Michael's office. And of course, one of the things that they have to construct is, how is this different from current religion? And I have a clip to share for you for that.
So who is right? I mean, about all of this?
Well, let's see. Hindus are a little bit right, Muslims a little bit, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, every religion guessed about 5%, except for Doug Forsett.
Who's Doug Forsett?
Well, Doug was a stoner kid who lived in Calgary during the 1970s.
So right off the bat, what they did here in this show, they didn't waste any time in making a mockery of not only Christianity, but essentially kind of, in a sense, all religions, by telling the audience that the religions only got it 5% right. But yet, if you notice the irony here, they've erected a monument of sorts for Doug Forsett, who's the stoner dude that just had the epiphany while he was high, that got 90% understanding of how the cosmic grand afterlife actually runs. And that they had to have a visual here of idolatry is not missed as part of my review here. False idols is definitely a big problem that we have in today's world, and making a mockery of religion is not something new to Hollywood. But despite that, right, they go on to essentially construct the notion of the afterlife as most Western society tends to have an understanding of, or actually I should say a misunderstanding of, because this is set up with completely false notions of what we think the afterlife should be based off of. So anyway, off we go. The cast is introduced into the good place, and they're shown the lay of the land. And because there's only 4 people in this fake universe that are actually truly there to be tortured, the rest of them are all actors meant to trick them. Michael ends up having to pair them up. So he pairs up Jason and Tahani as a couple, and he also pairs up Chidi and Eleanor as a couple. They actually end up being a love match throughout the course of the show, and you try to see that play out throughout the course of the series. But anyway, because this is supposed to be the good place, Eleanor and Jason figure out real quickly that they don't belong. And this is where things start to unfold, and as well as unravel Michael's plan. And so Eleanor recruits Chidi, who happens to be a professor of ethics, and she seeks his help and lets him know that she doesn't belong there either. And so Chidi begins to try to teach her how to be a good person, essentially. But of course, the problem with that is these morals are based on human notions, philosophy of of ethics, what we call meta ethics, utilitarianism, and definitely a lot of things in this narrative are rooted in what I would call humanism, which is basically trying to have a human construct of deciding what is objective standards here. And without God at the center, that's really impossible. Without an external way to determine what is truly objectively good and bad, humanism just fails. And in this context, they perverted that by trying to show how humans could ultimately prevail and succeed in determining what is truly objectively good and objectively bad. But, you know, this is people that are morally bankrupt, and so it's a very tiring process trying to get these people to change their ways. But anyway, one of the other things that they stumble upon is that there's a point system, and this is kind of one of the other things that is a misunderstanding in Western society, which is that you can earn your way to heaven. And as Christians, we need to constantly make sure that we tell everybody and anybody when we're evangelizing that you can't earn your way to heaven. You can't be a good enough person to get into heaven. We can only get there by accepting Jesus Christ as our Savior. But anyway, this is the classic notion where they believe that they can get into heaven that way. Well, anyway, eventually the cast discovers that, hey, this is actually really the bad place, and they confront Michael about it, and they're like, hey, look, this is not the right place. We figured this out, right? Jig is up. And so things start to unfold to an even greater degree. We see that there's other characters throughout the mix. There is an actual bad place run by, no, not the devil, but a guy named Sean. Now, he's, I think, technically just middle management as well, but he's got his own bad Janet. But hell is definitely a real place, and because these guys screwed up, then that's where they need to be going. But of course, they need to try to escape that scenario. And there are actually even demons in the show. So again, all the classic things that we would think when we think of how Christian is misapplied in Western society, then you have your classic heaven, hell, demons, all that kind of stuff, right? Believe it or not, there actually also is a perverted version of purgatory, what they call here the medium place, and it's incredibly stale. For example, she gets to drink all the beer that she wants to, but it's always going to be warm. There's only one occupant in this universe. But the cast figures out a way to get themselves to the actual real good place for themselves. But because they've just made a big mess out of everything in terms of trying to reorder the nature of their fate, they have to go see the judge. And no, this is not God. This is, again, another version of middle management. In this case, in the cosmic sense, there is a judge that is the arbiter of what needs to be right and wrong, what is good and bad, what's the order of things, and she wants to sentence them all to annihilation. But the cast figures out a plan to try to avoid that by coming up with their own version of how they think the system needs to play out, because they realized that things were wrong, that they shouldn't have been there in the first place, but that they figured out a way to become good collectively as a team, that there's a way to fix this. And they show that the point system was broken and that there's a way that they can fix that too. And anyway, they find a way to convince the judge to their plan, and they end up going to the good place for real, and all is right in the world. So all of these people who were morally bankrupt, who were destined to go to the bad place in the first place, architected by a demon, end up becoming the saviors of everything and make everything right and good again in the cosmic universe. Now, when they go to the good place, they actually discover that it's a big snooze fest, and everybody there has essentially gotten so bored of being good all the time that they had to come up with yet again a way to fix that too. And what they came up with was this doorway that would allow people to end their existence when they feel that they've had enough of the good place. And to me, this is kind of a metaphor for making sure that they covered the atheistic and the nihilistic approach to what people think of life, in the sense of this is all there is, live it up, you don't have to worry about an objective sense of justice at the end of the afterlife, you just cease to exist. And so that was inserted into the show as well. And anyway, because they fixed that too, a party ensues, and everybody gets there happily ever after. Now, Jason ended up falling in love with Janet and vice versa. And I guess this is just a metaphor for saying that, hey, you don't even have to love humans. You can like fall in love with devices and things that aren't human in this world and still have a way to have bliss. Of course, the main characters, they made their right love connection and got their happily ever after ending. And even Michael, the demon, got his happily ever after ending by getting to become a human, kind of a weird play on Pinocchio. Instead of being a real boy, he's actually a real human. He gets to enjoy a human life. And of course, the show ends where everybody else essentially takes the doorway because, you know, they've had enough goodness for a zillion lifetimes. But because we are talking about Hollywood and a show, ultimately this is a show where they try to portray everything where right is what conquers all, but really it's the reverse. They made evil good, good evil, wrong is right, right is wrong, and ultimately they just made a mockery of what the truth is about the afterlife and eternity. So for that, I give The Good Place a big giant thumbs down. If you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing. God bless you.